Hello.
How are you tonight?
Good. I'm
How's the
trying to
golf?
send you
I'm sorry, what?
I'm trying to send you a picture, but my phone won't send it.
Okay, is it stuff you can verbalize?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try. Let's do as much as we can by verbalization, and then maybe you can try sending it through your phone again.
Should I try to send it through text? Because I'm trying to do it through email and it won't work.
Yeah, you can try that. I might be able to look at it. Go ahead and send it to my phone number and see if that works.
Alright.
My problem is I'm not sure I know how to forward it from my phone to my email, but that's okay. I can still probably look at it on my phone and figure out the problems that need to be seen, to do. We don't want to spend too much time wasted on this just because we only have 30 minutes. So if you want to get started by go ahead and verbalizing one.
Alright. So the cotangent.
So we're on Trig, right?
Yeah.
In other words, you're in pre-calc Trig and the whole first semester is going to be Trig?
Yeah.
All right. Most of these can be verbalized. I don't think we need to look at anything.
Yeah. Then parentheses, 90 degrees minus whatever that degrees or the
Theta?
what is it called? Yeah, theta.
Okay.
And then equals negative 15 over 8. And then it's cosine of theta is less than 0.
Okay.
And then find secant.
Okay. This is a modification of a very typical problem, which the most common problem in trig is they're going to give you one trig function and tell you what its value is, and then they're going to ask you what the other 6 trig functions would be. Okay.
Right.
Now, they didn't actually give us the trig function. They said cosine. There is a property of cofunctions. First of all, let's talk about it. What's the cofunction of sine?
It's cosine.
The property of that is the sine of theta is equal to the cosine of 90 degrees minus theta. Always. Notice that when theta is 1/2, which is when theta is 30 degrees, the sine of 30 would be 1/2. Well, if I substitute 30 here, that means the cosine of 60 is 1/2. So this relationship holds for all cofunctions, and it holds in reverse too. In other words, the cosine of theta is equal to the sine of 90 degrees minus theta. So any 2 trig functions that are cofunctions, and cofunctions are really easy. You just take the trig function and stick a co in front of it. In other words, what's the cofunction of tangent?
Cotangent.
What's the cofunction of secant?
Cosine.
Okay. What's the cofunction of cotangent?
Tangent.
So I can say that this is the same thing. In other words, cotangent of 90 degrees minus theta is the same as the tangent of theta being equal to 15/8.
All right.
Okay? Now, whenever you get this problem, I think the simplest way to solve these problems, always, once you get it to this step, is to draw a right triangle.
All right.
and label theta. Both of those steps are necessary because theta could be there, theta could be up there. So I have to start here. This is the way I'm going to solve this problem. Now,
All right.
for the moment, don't worry about positive or negative. Just, we're going to treat everything like it's first quadrant. And so that's what allows me to be able to draw this triangle. Can I label this triangle? Is there anything I know about it?
Yeah.
Tell me how to label it. What's the side opposite the theta going to be?
15.
What's the side adjacent to theta going to be?
8.
The fact that it's minus 15/8 doesn't matter yet. We'll get to that.
All right.
The hypotenuse.
17.
Very good. You recognized an 8, 15, 17 triangle?
Yeah.
Very good. Most people would not recognize that. Okay, so now that we have the full triangle dimensioned, I can tell you what the sine of theta is, the cosine of theta, the tangent of theta. I can give you all 6 trig functions as long as I know all 3 sides, right?
Yeah.
Well, why did they tell us the cosine of theta was less than 0? And the tangent of theta is actually negative. Which quadrant does it have to be in? Where is the cosine negative and the tangent negative?
Isn't it in the third quadrant?
Tangent's positive in the third. Remember, all students take calculus.
Yeah. So it's the second quadrant.
Exactly. Second quadrant, tangent is negative, so it fits that, and cosine is negative, so it fits that. So this information they give you up here is merely to tell you which quadrant you're in.
All right.
Okay. Now we know that we're in the second quadrant. What did they want? The secant?
Yeah.
So what's the secant of theta, given that it's second quadrant? First of all, what's the absolute value of the secant of theta?
It'd be 17 over 15.
Is it the reciprocal of sine or the reciprocal of cosine?
It's the reciprocal of sine.
Actually not. Let's go over those.
All right.
I'll give you a nice little method for memorizing these also.
I thought I had these memorized, but now my teacher is really confusing me.
Okay? These are your reciprocal relationships. Notice that every single pair has one co in it. There's the co there, there's the co there, there's the co there. You know that that's true. You can always start with that. So the only problem ever is, does the secant go with the cosine or does it go with the sine? Right?
Yeah.
Well, as long as you remember that there has to be a co in every pair, and these are not cofunctions, incidentally. In other words, the problem we're dealing with started with cofunctions, but now it's really more of figuring out what the reciprocal functions are. So secant has to be the reciprocal of cosine. So if we go back to our problem,
so
what is it? 17 over what?
8.
That's the absolute value, and it's in the second quadrant, so is it positive or negative? Remember, it has to have the same sign
negative
as its reciprocal.
It's negative.
So it's negative 17/8. And that's exactly the steps you need to do to solve that problem. That's a pretty good problem because it expands a little bit on your traditional problem. In other words, traditionally, they would have skipped that step right there. In other words, the classic trig problem would be tangent of theta is minus 15 over 8, cosine is less than 0, what's the secant of theta? And this would have allowed you to dimension two of the three sides of the triangle. Pythagorean theorem always allows you to dimension the third side. And once you have the whole thing dimensioned, now you figure out which quadrant you're in based on this and this. Because cosine is negative actually in the second and the third. But cosine is only negative and tangent is negative only in the second. So you need both of these pieces of information to figure out that it's second quadrant. Then all you do is figure out the absolute value, and then you put this plus or minus sign on it appropriately based on which quadrant it's in. Okay, is there another one you can verbalize before? I don't want to spend time trying to figure out how to get this picture over until we need to.
Yeah. So it's secant of pi over 2 minus theta equals -3. And then tangent of theta is greater than 0.
Okay.
Then find secant.
That is the same as what we just dealt with. 90 degrees minus theta is the same as pi over 2 minus theta.
All right.
So what is the secant of pi over 2 minus theta equal to?
It'd be...
In other words, what can I replace that with? What's its cofunction?
Sine.
No, that's its, and that's not even its reciprocal. Cosecant would be the reciprocal sine. Remember that reciprocal is not the same as cofunction. Even though the tip I gave you for memorizing it is there's one co in each pair, it's still not the cofunctions. Cofunctions are merely the trig function with the word co in front of it. So if I want to know the cofunction of secant, it's cosecant.
Okay.
So that's the same as that. In other words, secant of pi over 2 minus theta is the same as cosecant of theta.
All right.
What's the next step?
It'd be... What my teacher's been having us do is just have that over 1. So it's...
The next step is to draw the triangle. And you're right. I'm going to put a 1 under that. But before I do, I want to make sure you don't ever forget this is the next step. Because this is where people tend to get lost, is at this step. They don't know to do this step. And this step is very simple, really. How can I dimension this triangle? By, first of all, making that read 3 over 1. And now, which two sides can I dimension?
It'd be...
Cosecant is reciprocal of what?
Sine.
Okay.
Sine.
So which two sides can I dimension?
The opposite and then the hypotenuse.
What's the opposite going to be?
1.
Hypotenuse?
3.
And again, don't care about that negative sign yet. Now, what's this side down here? In other words, the next step is to fully dimension the triangle. What's the quick way I taught you?
Isn't it just 2x?
No, remember that when you're solving right triangle, The answer always begins with square root of. So what is it the square root of?
Isn't square root of
If I'm doing one of the short sides, it's always the square root of the hypotenuse squared minus the other side squared.
Right.
That's square root of 8.
Yeah.
Square root of 8 is also 2 root 2. So we'll put its simplified version down there. Okay. Now we've got all three sides. Now, which quadrant are we in? Where is the tangent greater than 0 and the cosecant is negative?
It would be in the third quadrant.
Yes. So we go up here and we're going to write third. Okay. So what do they want to know?
The secant.
What's the absolute value of the secant?
It would be 3 over 2 over, or
You got
2
it.
root 2.
It's 3 over 2 root 2, right?
Yeah.
There's the way I always do these secondary trig functions, the 3 that aren't on your calculator, is first of all I figure out, well, that's the reciprocal of cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, therefore secant is the reverse of that. It's hypotenuse over adjacent. Okay, now what's wrong with this answer? What do we need to do to that answer?
You need to make it negative.
Well, not yet. Well, let's first of all, is it negative or positive in the third quadrant?
It's positive.
All students take calculus. That means only tangent and its reciprocal is negative or is positive in the third. So secants and cosines and sines and cosecants are all going to be negative in the third. Okay, so I definitely need a negative sign there. But there's still something wrong with that answer. What is it?
It's not correct. It's
not rationalized.
Yeah.
In other words, how do we rationalize this answer?
Take root 2 and multiply the top and bottom by root 2.
What do you get?
You get 3 root 2 over 4.
Put the negative sign back in there. The thing that I have found that really helps with trig is if you come up with the number first and then the sign, the plus or minus sign, rather than worrying about the sign at all. In other words, I basically, you'll notice, ignored the sign until we needed to figure out what it was. When I drew my triangle, I didn't try to draw a reference angle. In other words, the moment, so this is your answer, minus 3 root 2 over 4. But here's the thing. Your teacher may actually do it this way. Figure out that it's in the third quadrant. And so here's the reference angle. There's theta. And then this would have to be 3. And this would have to be 1. Okay? I don't like that method. I love the method where you draw a standard right triangle. That's the next step. And label theta. In other words, do everything in the first quadrant. Now I can label that 3 and 1, and then 2 root 2, And now I can figure out any trig function you want, and as long as I know which quadrant it's in, I'm going to know whether it's plus or minus.
Yeah.
All right. Got another one? Or you want me to look at my phone? Do you have any more you can verbalize?
Yeah.
How do I forward this? Do you know? I have an Android. I'm looking at the picture, and I haven't been able... forward. I can do it. I just touched it, and it came up with... let me do it real quick. Okay. I had that problem the other day. I was trying to forward it, and I couldn't figure out how to forward it. And I realize now is all I got to do is touch the picture, and it presents me with a menu of operations. It may take a second or so for that to get there. So, do you have another one you can verbalize?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, sine 90 minus theta equals 7/9.
Tell me everything I should do here.
And then sine of theta is less than 0.
Okay. It's the first thing I should do.
Change that to cosine. Yeah.
Now what?
And then that would be...
What's the next step?
Create a triangle.
And
That's
label theta. If
Yeah.
I draw a triangle and I don't label theta, I got problems because theta could be up here.
All right.
Okay, so that's why it's really important to label theta. You can't really begin to dimension this triangle if you don't label theta, because there's 3 possible thetas actually. So now what can I dimension on this thing?
The hypotenuse and the
It's the hypotenuse.
9.
What other
And
side?
then the adjacent side, which is 7.
Now what's this side?
It would be... This is not Pythagorean triple.
Same thing as the previous problem.
So
The answer is going to always start out square root of. What is the square root of?
The square root of 9 squared minus 7 squared.
You got it. That's the square root of 14? Oh, no, excuse me. 81 minus 49 is what? 81 minus 49 is 32? Yeah.
So...
Now, I can go about simplifying that, and it does simplify, but that's not really what they're after. So let's not worry about simplifying it. Let's just put it down there as that. We'll simplify it later, because it may be that we need to simplify it and we may not need to. Which quadrant are we in? And our 2 clues are the sine is negative and the cosine is positive. Where does that occur?
That's in the 4th.
Yes. 4th quadrant. And what do they want to know? Which function? At this point, we could answer any trig function they wanted. The other 5. Because we have the triangle and we have all 3 sides. So I can tell you what the tangent of theta is, the secant, the cosecant. Which one do they want?
Cosecant.
What's the absolute value of the cosecant of theta? Cosecant's reciprocal to what?
Sine.
Okay.
So it's square root of 32 over 9. Or no.
The reciprocal.
No, not. Yeah, it's the 9 over square root of 30.
There you go. And is it plus or minus?
It's
Fourth quadrant.
minus.
Yes.
Negative.
In other words, they basically tell us that sine is minus. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so it also has to be minus. So we're going to have to do the rationalization process again. Is it easier to simplify this first or rationalize it first?
Rationalize it.
I'm not sure, to be honest, which is easier. How would I rationalize?
Take square root of 32 from both sides, or multiply, and then get 9 square root 32 over 32.
All right, now I can't avoid but having to simplify that. And in fact, there probably is never a situation where you would not have to simplify that. Which means probably our best bet is to simplify it from the beginning. In other words, I didn't, because we didn't need it simplified until we got to the end. But what does square root of 32 simplify as?
Isn't it 2 root 4? No.
What's it?
No, 4.
There you go. It's the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. And that's the way to do these. Always do it like this. And then just replace that with a 4. Okay. So now I can go up here and replace this square root of 32 with 4 root 2. Now, what do I have? I have minus 36 root 2 over 32. Can I simplify that?
Yeah.
What does that become? What's the greatest common factor between 36 and 32?
4.
Okay, so divide the top by 4.
So that would be
just divide that number by 4.
Yeah. It would be 9 over 2 and then 8.
There's your answer. Okay, so it's the same process. All 3 problems we did can be done exactly the same way, and they were all cofunction questions. That must be the order of the day, huh? Is cofunctions?
Yeah.
All right. Let me look at this email real quick. Oh, I didn't get it. Interesting. Huh. It didn't forward it. You have another one you can verbalize?
No, the rest of them are almost the exact same as the rest. All of them.
Yeah, the key is starting with the 90 degrees minus theta, or pi over 2 minus theta. Use the cofunction properties, and then go from there. In other words, all of these problems had essentially one step more than a traditional problem. And that is that instead of starting out by telling you what a single trig function was, they started out by telling you what a trig function of 90 degrees minus theta was. And so you need to know what the cofunction is as the first step.
Yeah.
But the key step a step that you always want to remember, because this is really like the quintessential problem for trig, is drawing that triangle. That's the key step. If I tell you that the sine of theta equals 7/12, that allows me to draw the triangle, label theta, label 7, label 12. Now this has to be the square root of 144 minus 49. Now I have all three angles, or all three dimensions, and I can tell you what any trig function in the first quadrant would be.
Yeah.
So they always give you that one extra little piece of information, like tangent is, what have I said, tangent's greater than 0. What quadrant is that?
First.
Yes. In other words, between the two pieces of information they give you, you can always figure out the quadrant. That's never going to be ambiguous. In other words, it's never going to be a situation where it could be first or fourth, or it could be first or third. It's always going to be a specific quadrant. Once you have it nailed down to that specific quadrant, then you can go from there. And then you look at your other trig functions and what is their sign in that first quadrant.
All right.
So these are all pretty straightforward. Same method, every one.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right, Mitch, have a good week, and I will talk to you next week.
Right.
Yeah, gosh, why did this not go to my email from either of our phones? I wonder why. Huh,
I don't know.
it's kind of weird. And I got another email, so, interesting. All right, I'll talk to you next Wednesday.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.